The most dangerous person in the room is not always the strongest. Sometimes it's the weakest person who stayed silent too long. The person everyone ignored, the person nobody respected, the person who kept swallowing humiliation again and again until something inside them changed. Because human beings don't break all at once. First, they feel powerless, then invisible, then angry, and eventually dangerous. But here's the disturbing part. Most people never realize the transformation is happening until it's already too late. Psychologists notice something strange about suppressed people. The longer someone feels weak, the more obsessed they become with power. Not always physical power. Sometimes emotional power, control, revenge, fear, attention. And when a human being feels small for too long, their mind begins searching for a way to stop feeling helpless, no matter the cost. Think about it. Why do some quiet people suddenly explode after years of silence? Why do bullied kids sometimes become emotionally cold adults? Why do insecure people become manipulative? Why do rejected people become cruel? The answer is hidden deep inside human psychology. And once you see it, you'll never look at people the same way again. Weakness itself is not dangerous. Suppressed weakness is. There's a massive difference. A mentally healthy person can admit weakness without shame. But a person who secretly hates their own weakness becomes psychologically unstable over time because humiliation changes the brain. Not immediately, slowly, like pressure building inside a sealed container. Every insult, every rejection, every moment of disrespect gets stored emotionally. And most people think silence means peace. It doesn't. Sometimes silence is just anger, waiting for permission. Psychologists found that humans can tolerate pain better than humiliation. Pain hurts the body. Humiliation attacks identity. It tells someone you are beneath others. You are powerless. You don't matter. And the human ego fights desperately against that feeling. Even weak people, especially weak people. Because when someone lacks confidence internally, they become hypersensitive to disrespect externally. A confident person can laugh off embarrassment. An insecure person remembers it for years. And this changes everything. Now, watch carefully what happens next. At first, weak people usually avoid conflict. They stay quiet. They tolerate disrespect. They overthink conversations later at night. But internally, something dangerous begins growing. Resentment. And resentment is one of the darkest emotional forces in human behavior. Because resentment doesn't disappear. It evolves into obsession, into passive aggression, into manipulation, into revenge fantasies. Most people never realize this. The people who feel powerless often spend the most time imagining power. That's why some of the most controlling people are deeply insecure underneath. Control becomes compensation. Think about certain bosses, bullies, manipulative partners. Many of them are not truly strong. They're terrified of feeling weak again. So they dominate others before others can dominate them. It's psychological armor. And the scariest part? Sometimes even they don't realize they're doing it. Psychologists notice something strange in people who experience chronic humiliation. Over time, their identity starts splitting into two versions. The outside self and the hidden self. Outside, quiet, polite, harmless. Inside, angry, ashamed, hungry for significance. That inner tension becomes emotionally exhausting. And eventually, the mind searches for release. This is why ignored people can become unpredictable. because unpredictability often comes from emotional overload. A person who feels respected usually has emotional stability, but a person who constantly feels invisible starts craving emotional impact. Any impact. Even fear. Especially fear. Because fear finally makes people pay attention. Look at school environments. Sometimes the quietest student isn't peaceful. They're simply disconnected. They sit alone. Nobody notices them. Nobody asks questions. And slowly, their inner world becomes darker than anyone realizes. The same thing happens in workplaces. An employee who feels undervalued for years may not quit immediately. First, they emotionally detach. Then, bitterness grows. Then, sabotage becomes psychologically tempting. Not because they're evil, because resentment changes perception. Once someone feels emotionally rejected by a system, they stop caring about protecting it. And relationships, this becomes even more dangerous there. An emotionally weak person who fears abandonment can become controlling, jealous, manipulative, even destructive. Why? Because insecurity creates survival behavior. If someone believes they're not enough, they may try to gain power through guilt, emotional pressure, or control. Not love, control. Because control feels safer than vulnerability. Strong people usually don't need to prove power constantly. That's what insecure people do. A truly confident person doesn't obsess over dominance. They don't need everyone's validation. They don't need revenge to feel valuable. But weak people with wounded egos, that's different. Their self-worth depends on external reactions. Respect becomes addictive. Attention becomes survival. And rejections feels like psychological death. But here's the disturbing part. The real danger appears when a person feels they have nothing left to lose. This is the hidden trigger psychologists fear most. Hopelessness. Because hopeless people stop thinking normally. When humans believe the future still exists, they control themselves. But when someone emotionally gives up, internal limits collapse. And suddenly, the quiet person becomes reckless. The insecure person becomes aggressive. The weak person becomes terrifying. Not because they gained strength, because they lost fear. And humans without fear can become unbelievably dangerous. History proves this again and again. Some of the darkest human actions were not created by powerful people alone, but by humiliated people desperate to reclaim significance. That's why emotional pain should never be underestimated. A wounded ego can reshape an entire personality. But now comes the most important part. How do mentally strong people avoid becoming dangerous? Self-awareness. That's the difference. Like, mentally strong people acknowledge pain before it poisons them. They don't suppress emotions endlessly. They process them, understand them, control them. Because emotional control is not weakness, it's power. Real strength is being humiliated without becoming cruel, being rejected without becoming hateful, being underestimated without needing revenge to feel valuable. Most people think strength means domination. Psychology says otherwise. The strongest minds are usually the calmest ones, because they don't need constant validation from the outside world. Their stability comes from within, and this changes everything. A mentally stable person doesn't become obsessed with proving themselves. They improve quietly. They heal quietly. They grow quietly. While insecure people burn energy trying to appear powerful, truly strong people focus on becoming peaceful. That's real power. not intimidation, not manipulation, not revenge. Inner stability. Because once someone can control their emotions, they stop needing to control everyone else. And maybe that's the biggest psychological lesson of all. The weak become dangerous when pain controls them. The strong become peaceful when they learn to control their pain. So the next time you meet someone quiet, don't assume you understand them. Some silent people are wise, some are broken, and some are fighting wars inside their minds that nobody can see. In the end, the most dangerous human being is not always the angry one. It's the person who suffered silently until suffering became identity. Because when pain stays hidden long enough, it eventually starts searching for an escape. And sometimes that escape destroys everything around it. So here's the question. What creates a dangerous person faster? Power or humiliation? Think about that carefully. And if you enjoy exploring the darker side of human psychology, human behavior, and emotional intelligence, subscribe. Because this community doesn't just watch psychology, it understands it.